Welcome to The Writer's Dream, books, authors, and stories. You can find us at my Facebook page called The Writer's Dream. If you have a question about the show or you want to be on the show, please message me through that Facebook page. We're also on YouTube. You have to search my name, Linda Maria Frank, and click on my picture. I'm the author of Annie Tillery Mysteries. You will see about 150 authors on that YouTube channel, and you'll get a lot of information about local authors, great books, good authors. Some of the shows are, all of the shows, I shouldn't say some of the shows, are really a lot of fun. You can also see us here at LTVEH, just search Video on Demand. And The Writer's Dream is on Cablevision Channel 20, Thursday afternoons at 3 o'clock. Today's guest is Gloria Glantz. Gloria has written a memoir called From Home to Home to Home, and it's about her experiences during World War II, during the Holocaust, as a Jewish child. I am going to attempt, I'm Polish, but this is not going to be easy for me. I'm going to attempt to read this nice little introduction with some Polish names in it. There was great joy in the Piorka home of Wegengrove when Mendel and Esther welcomed their little princess Gitela, born after two boy siblings already 9 and 12 years old. It was spring of 1939, but the bliss was short-lived. When Gitela was 3 months old, Hitler's army marched into Poland and stole her happy childhood. Yet there was a flicker of light in the darkness. Over the years, the light grew and blazed into bright sunshine. Its source was the unlikely love and courage of a woman who dared defy her countrymen's hatred by loving and sheltering a Jewish child. Thus, this testimony of Gloria Glantz, though it is a Holocaust memoir, is truly about love and compassion. She is here because people loved her even before they knew her. Herein is a gripping tale of fear, danger, and loss, and of going from home to home to home to eventual redemption and renewal. It is a story all of us and future generations must know and remember. So without further ado, Gloria.
Thank you.
Gloria is going to show you some wonderful pictures, and she's going to tell you a heartwarming story.
Well, thank you, first of all, for that beautiful introduction. I'm going to contradict you right away.
Oh, good.
Because
I love to be contradicted.
this is not a story. This is testimony. Some people do not believe it ever happened. But even the Germans kept the most impeccable records of everything. So we know that this is testimony. And I'm making all of you witnesses that this happened. All of you are witnesses that this happened. So the book is called From Home to Home to Home. And as you can see on the cover, you can see all the nests on the cover. And they are there. The whole book is a metaphor for a bird, because my name, when I was born, that is very difficult to pronounce, Pshepurka, means little bird. And so this little bird is now going to speak up, and I'm no longer hidden. I am now out in the open. So this is my town, Vengrov, which was, this town was filled with Jews. 55% of all the people living in this town of Vengrov were Jewish. And Jews had lived there since the 1600s. And they had a love-hate relationship. Sometimes there was good times, sometimes bad. But it was a town that was steeped in Jewish learning. This is the Beit HaMidrash was there. that means a synagogue. They had a huge synagogue, just like you see, and it said Beit Hagadol, Beit HaKnesset Hagadol Bevengrov, means the big synagogue in Vengrov.
Oh, this is nice. This is really nice.
This is, my family lived there. And so you can see my family, my grandfather with the beard and my grandmother next to him. My grandpa Pinchas, Grandma Rachel. Next to Grandma Rachel is another man with a beard. That's my oldest uncle, Shlomo.
Of those people, how many survived?
Well,
Anyone?
I did, and my aunt who came to America in the 1920s. She's the one who orchestrated my
Right,
coming.
right. Well,
And
she
one aunt who jumped off the train on the way to Treblinka. My father's youngest sister, who is, I'll show you on the picture.
Okay.
She's next to the house on the left, my
Okay.
Aunt Norma. Those were the only ones survived.
Okay.
There were 10 children, and my aunt on the bottom, my father is on the left. His sister, my Aunt Esther, the one who brought me here, is next to him. And next to her is my cousin Fischel. He's the son of the man with the beard that you saw on top, on the right, my uncle.
Okay.
So he's my first cousin. He immigrated to Palestine, because we were the first Palestinians. And then in the late 20s, like 29, 30, before the Holocaust. And he actually was the one, a very lucky person, because Hitler entered September 1st into Poland, and he had a flight to go back to Israel, to Palestine, after visiting his family the next day.
Okay, so what happened to you? How old were you?
3 months old. When
3
Hitler
months
entered.
old. Okay, so
I'm 3 months old. There I am in the cradle. My two brothers, who were 9 and 12 when I was born, 9 and 11 actually, I think Zelig was the taller one. My aunt, the one who jumped off the train, is sitting next to the cradle. My parents, my father is right behind her with the glasses on. This is early morning. They're in their pajamas.
yeah, everybody's in their pajamas. Yeah. Yeah.
And my mother with the kerchief, she had just given birth to me. And then another aunt and my cousin Fischel, the one who was going home, luckily, the day before the Germans entered.
So when they came to your town,
Vengrov.
Vengrov, how many people actually survived?
Okay, Vengrov was part of a ghetto.
Okay.
And it started out as like 1,500 to 2,000. It was a very small shtetl. It started out as 15 to 2,000. When it became a ghetto, it rose up to 35,000.
Because people came in.
People came from other little towns.
Right, to try to
So out of
survive.
those 3,500, 157 survived.
Wow.
And out of those 157, 4 children survived.
And you were one of
I'm
them.
one of them.
All right, tell
And
us
I
your
know
story.
the second one.
Tell us your story.
Okay. So my next picture would be my brother Zelig and my brother Yitzchak. Zelig had to wear the
The star.
armband with the star. And very interestingly, they went to parochial Polish schools. Of course, they were bombarded with stones and, called names and everything. But they were very good students. And my father, fortunately, made us speak Polish in the house. There was not a word of Yiddish. Now, of course, he spoke Yiddish to his father with the beard, who studied the Torah all day long. But he insisted that we all speak Polish. So my brothers and I were fluent in Polish, and this has something to do with my survival.
I would bet. I
For
would
sure.
bet.
So the next picture is That is me, Gittel Shapurka, Chana Gittel, actually, I had a middle name.
You were cute.
With the curly hair that my granddaughter, my 9-year-old granddaughter, when she was 3, looked exactly like her.
Oh, that's adorable.
And so when I came to my rescuer, my mother brought me one night to this woman, Maria Kowalczyk. And Maria Kowalczyk knew me since the day I was born and knew my family because her husband worked for my father. And she, of course, you know, everybody loves babies, so she did love me before she knew me.
Did she have children of her own?
She had an adopted daughter, Stanka,
Okay.
who loved me and I loved her. That's Maria Kowalczyk, Mariana, sometimes called. I called her Matka, which means mother in Polish. And Stanka also loved me and I loved her. The father, Maria's husband, Michał, I didn't have much to do with because he worked late hours and there was one problem with him. He got along great with my father, but he was a drinker. And so sometimes Maria had to keep secrets from him because she hid 2 other people. And she had to tell him that she let them go, so she moved them to the attic.
Because otherwise, when he was drinking.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So when he drank too much, he might reveal.
So tell us exactly the day that you were rescued.
I was 3.5 years old, so it was 1942 in spring. My mother brings me to this woman who I didn't really know her. I had seen her, but I didn't never talk to her. And she just says, "You have to stay here, Gittele." And she turns around and starts to walk to the door. So of course, being 3, and I said, "And you too, Mama?" And she just walks to the door. And so I run after her, I grab her knees, I grab her coat, and I'm restrained, and my mother walks out the door.
She couldn't handle it. I mean, it was probably so traumatic for her.
I can't imagine it now that I have my own kids. And I never saw her again.
So she died in the camps?
Treblinka. Second, there were 2 movements of, I'll talk a little about Treblinka in a little while. So the woman tried to comfort me, and, you know, you'll have a bath, you'll have some nice milk and cookies, and tomorrow you'll be a big girl. So I woke up after a tearful night, and I said, "Am I a big girl yet?" I had to become a big girl very quickly because that was the last time I saw any member of my family, my brothers, my father. I wrote a poem called Despair and Hope, and this one I would like to read, actually. The world is torn. We wake to the startling news. People are tortured, halved, and quartered. Families are shredded, and voices are stilled. He who lies down at night moans or may not wake. As the moments slip away, repair the broken world. We long for it. One is startled, knowing that all that has been planted has not, nor will ever, bloom. But always we strive upward and hope. For the Jews, it's been centuries of hope and despair.
Yeah.
And
Just read the Bible,
anti-Semitism
right?
and despair. and somehow we survive and we say, all right, they tried to kill us, let's eat. So that's
Survive and thrive.
survive and thrive. That's right, I never heard of that. So this is one of the poems, and that's the only one I'm
So,
going to read.
Let's see what
From the
happened to
book.
you next.
Well, I just want to talk about my father's death certificate. When I was writing this book, I came across this document. Now, I went to my matka in 1942. My father, according to this, it gives his name, his address, Mendel Shapurka, and 939 Verhaft, Vengrove. Verhaft means imprisoned, okay? And where and Anfang 41, beginning of 1941, it says umgekommen, deceased. He was not deceased. He was murdered.
Oh, well, he was deceased if he was murdered.
Yes,
but I'm surprised, actually, to tell you the truth, that there is a record. He went to a camp and died in the camp. That there was actually a record.
First he was arrested, and they tell you when he died.
Okay.
Now I thought originally that he died because they came for the leather. He had a leather factory, and at that time everything was appropriated to Poles or to Germans. So I thought they came to his factory and said, you know, give us your leather, give us your money, you no longer, and he opened his mouth. But then I found out, and I even saw the grave, and I'll show you, that he was buried alive in Treblinka.
So
he was born in 1893. He was 40 when I was born, actually 10 years older than my mother. He was 48 when he died. My mother was 10 years younger than he, and she died in Treblinka when she was around 38.
what happened to you? What happened to you?
Well, I was with my matka.
Tell
So
us the
I
story.
will. But first I want to tell you a little bit about my father. Now, the next slide shows my father on the left and the middle. He is a very handsome man. As a matter of fact, I met a woman whose mother was in love. She told me, my mother was in love with your father. And you can see why. He was rich, first of all. He owned the factory. He was a businessman. He always dressed like the middle. Always went to a photographer to have pictures taken. There he is. He must have been at a bar mitzvah or a wedding in a formal attire on the left. And then my son in that picture on the right, that's our son Craig. Does he look a little like my father? I'm always looking for a trait of my father that somebody might have.
10 minutes.
Okay. The next slide shows Yom Kippur, September 23rd. The rabbi of Vengrove was murdered. And he was...
I am dying to know what happened to you.
I know, but this is the background. This is Treblinka. I just want to show you the next slide, which gives you the meticulous records of the Germans. How many deportees there were, what days of the week. On Tuesday, 411 and 741. They don't even round off the numbers.
The Nazis were very good at keeping records.
Okay. The next page, the next slide, is a picture of, people said the Jews never resisted. Well, these men fled from Treblinka, and one of them is my Uncle Willie. He is on the right side in the back, the short man in the back. Uncle Willie survived with these men in the forest, foraging for plants and killing rabbits and so forth. And that's how they survived. He became the second husband of my Aunt Norma, who jumped off the train. He escaped from Treblinka when he was, after his wife and 5 sons were killed. Okay, the next slide shows, again, what would happen to you if you helped the Jews, okay? Sheltering or escaping Jews, death penalty. The next slide is a poem. The next slide is in German and Polish, the same message. And then there was a poem that I wrote in Distant Garden. And now, the war is over. Here I am, Guchep Shapurka, just
so
over
you
6
survived
years
the war.
old. I survived in my matka's house with her anti-Semitic mother-in-law. Right in the house, okay? And she was brilliant, but never had more than a third grade education. The next slide shows a document of Mariana's, in Mariana's own words, on how anti-Semitic Vengrove was. Not only was Poland, but this Vengrove was the most anti-Semitic town in Poland, okay? And she took me away because after the war, she was worried. First of all, people would come and kidnap the children if they knew they survived. And secondly, because she was afraid her neighbors now would steal from her because she felt, they felt that she had made money on saving me. So this rescuer was in danger, and also the other people, the savior.
So where did you go?
So the next place I went to, the next slide, I was leaving Matka, and my new hat and coat, and my first toy from my Aunt Norma brought me the doll. On the right is probably the first day of school, because I have a little book bag, September 1945. Now the war in Europe was over September 8th, 1945. Okay, next slide. This is my granddaughter. She was 5.5 when she drew this picture, because there was a poem.
Yes, from you going from place to place to place.
How I ran off the plane to get back to my Matka.
And you didn't really get to America directly, did you?
No, I had a couple of stops. 2 orphanages, one in Poland, which I didn't know about. I don't remember being there. Why? Because I didn't want to be there. And that's why I ran off the plane. That was illustrated by my granddaughter. I wrote a poem about that. She told, my Matka said that, because I wouldn't remember that.
No.
I remember I cried like mad leaving her, but I don't remember even being on a plane. So the next stop was this orphanage in Poland, because I found a picture which has the name has the name Otvatsk on it. And I read about Otvatsk, and the one thing that captures my attention is that it was a home was built there for orphans after the war. I look at the picture, and there's in that slide that you just saw, and I see myself sitting on the ground. There I am with the circle around. I recognize myself by the hair.
You're still cute. Keep going. Next stop.
Okay, then I went on the march. Oh, this was the Swedish orphanage, where I'm learning to ride a bike for a 25-year-old. And that little boy, he smiled at me all the time, never spoke, was deaf and mute. And I was wondering till today what he saw.
Yeah, whatever happened to him.
Okay, next slide. That's in Treblinka.
Is that your son?
My son and I visited in 205. That's our town. The next slide. That's in Israel, the Valley of the Lost Communities, in 1993.
Yeah,
My town is there. Gucha Kowalczyk, then Shapurka again. So that's the first picture is when I got to Matka. The second picture is a very cute picture where she went and bought me a beautiful dress, and she said, send this to your aunt in America so that she'll know you're alive and you're well. And also, I want to keep a copy of that picture. And the third one is when I was in Otvatsk, they fed us better, and I see my full face. Because this was specifically for kids.
Because the middle is very thin.
Okay. Next slide. That's a passport picture with to get to Montreal. Okay.
So, on to Canada.
The next picture is the Domjieka. That's the town where I was, where you saw my picture, established after the war. And the next picture, oh yeah, I go to Montreal, 1947.
And you're a young lady.
And here I am in 1949 with A.B. and Fanny Moritz.
I think I had the same dress.
And you can still see the curly hair, and that's where we lived. Today, it didn't look like that when I was there. Today, it looks like that. Vet 22 Fairmount West. Next slide. This is very important. I went to Jewish People's School, JPS. The school is in the middle. It's called the Yiddish Volksschule. It was a walk from Fairmount West. On the left is Principal Mr. Wiseman. He knew every child's name and history. On the right is my 5th grade teacher, my Hebrew teacher, Mr. Wilczewski. Okay? He was, the reason I remember him, he had the most beautiful speaking voice, and then he sang in the choir. And I still sing in the choir. I went to the choir because of him. You could see him. He was about 6 foot tall.
And there you are.
And here, this is the other family my matka saved. The one in the middle, next to me, is Marilla Friedman and her mother were hidden in the barn. And the man in the beige sweater lived to 97. He had false papers. His brother had false papers. He lived to 101. And the woman in the back
And
is
all of these people who survived are really a testimony to the human spirit. You have about a minute left.
Yes.
And I want you to tell the people who are going to see this show, what's your lesson from this?
Risk a kind act.
I love that. Risk a kind act.
Risk a kind act. Because you looked at the next picture, the next slide, you will see the barn where they were hidden. The Friedman family went back to Poland in '78, and her daughter Stanka is holding my picture. I left in '45. And the next picture, the rescued and the remembered, that's all my whole family. My grandpa, my mother is number 2. Number 6 is my mother, and this is Shabbat table, beautiful. We were wealthy, you know, wine on the table. She was 8 months pregnant with me. My Aunt Esther and Uncle Max on the bottom, number 8. On the left, way on the left, is Aunt Norma with her second husband, Willie. And on the right, I'm putting a yahrzeit candle at the Treblinka.
And you really have captured the story. You're so lucky to have all these pictures because many people, nothing survived.
Well,
risk
a kind
act.
Well, yes, but my Aunt Esther had it in her drawer.
I'm so glad that you survived so that you could tell the story.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show.
I just wanted to show you the last slide. Last slide. Okay. The blessings and the continuity. My husband and I, my daughter Jordana and her 3 kids, identical twins, a daughter and her husband, and our daughter-in-law and my son, Craig and Katie, and their 2 kids. And that's the joy they bring. The next.